Good to see a few people back from last week. And we also have a participant, Dave Woe, who's going to be doing a talks with us at Henry's Avalanche Talk through starting at the end of this autumn and through the winter as well. And we may hear from him as well. Thanks for tuning in, Dave.
So the plan is we're going to look at a couple of questions, and which I'll introduce in a minute, and then Henry's got a couple of short videos that introduces each of the questions. We'll do them one at a time, and so we'll be in webinar mode for a bit. If at any time you want to ask a question or want to speak, just raise your hand, and then for the last part of the session, we'll just open it up to questions. You can ask a question by raising your hand and speaking, or by clicking on the Q&A tab where we'll see where you can type them in. So I think that's enough time for people to get on, Henry. So if you're happy, we'll get underway.
Definitely. Where would you like to start, Chris?
So I think well, there were two questions we posed for this event. One was is climate change making things more dangerous, making the risk more dangerous for off-piste skiers? And then we'll have a look at that first. And then the second one was so what is the risk of going into avalanche terrain? And which is obviously one of the big subjects that the talks and the whole avalanche training addresses. So Henry, do you want to kick off by showing us the short video on with any introduction that you want on climate change, and then I'll ask a couple of questions about that.
Sure, yeah. And a very, very quick introduction to the impact on climate change. Is it increasing the danger of off-piste and touring backcountry? I think climate change can be substituted also with global warming. My impression is that in warmer temperatures, there is more avalanches, but there's less accidents. That's also backed up with statistics, and it's backed up on the trend throughout the winter from December through April, where December, January, February, early March, you get a lot more accidents, but in avalanches, and especially on the north side of the mountain. Whereas in the springtime, you get a lot less avalanches, and that's of course in the springtime you get a lot more avalanches but less accidents. Also, and that's in the northern hemisphere. Also, the trend tends to be in continental climates where it's cold and dry. The snowpack is generally a lot more unstable and unpredictable than it is in maritime climates, and the accidents tend to follow that in the cold, dry climates of the continental climates. There's more accidents than there are generally in maritime climates. But to summarize that, I'm going to put this video that I just did on, and that way we can have a quick you can have a quick view of. It's about 2 minutes long, a minute and a half long, and we will have a chat about it afterwards. Whoops.
It's not that one, is it?
It's this one here. Oh, no, it isn't this one here, is it? No, sorry, everybody. That is the next one on the risk of riding. Here's the one on climate. Global warming temperatures is a little more exciting at the beginning. Is global warming making off-piste and ski touring more dangerous? Well, if you follow the trend throughout the season, you get to springtime when temperatures are significantly higher than they are at the beginning of the winter season. Yes, you do have more avalanches, and they are louder and more destructive, especially to infrastructure, because of the fact that they're humid and wet snow avalanches. However, most accidents happen in cold, dry snow conditions in January, February, and March, and especially on north-ish facing slopes in the northern hemisphere. And they are dry, dry, cold slab avalanches that are involved 95% of the time, triggered by the victims themselves, someone in the group. And why this is covered in all of our talks and training at Henry's Avalanche Talk. Now, wet snow and humid snow avalanches can be very dangerous, so we need to continue to watch out for and avoid steep slopes that have been subjected to rapid rises in temperature, increased temperature throughout the day, and especially due to solar radiation, the sun on the slopes, and especially after snowfalls. So in summary, with increased temperatures, you get more avalanches, more destructive avalanches for infrastructure, like pylons and buildings on the slope, but a lot less accidents, a lot less deadly accidents on the slopes.
So
that, in summary, is my take.
That makes it sound really quite simple, Henry. Yeah, and that the risk of avalanches is potentially higher, but the risk of being caught in one is much lower.
Yeah, because it's more predictable. But what this emphasizes too, for the next part of the session here, what is the risk of riding an avalanche terrain? What this really underscores is how counterintuitive the whole avalanche safety thing is. And you'd think that there's more avalanches, there's more danger, but in general, it's at least less predictable. And if you define more dangerous in a less predictable place where statistically there's more accidents, then the danger will continue to exist in the colder parts of the mountain, colder climates, and on the colder sides of the mountain, and especially when there's cold, dry snow conditions and slab avalanche conditions.
What would you say to the idea that it's possible that climate change will bring about thinner snowpacks? And we certainly, those of us skiing in the European Alps in the last couple of years will certainly vouch for that, whether that's due to climate change or whatever. But thinner snowpacks have been prevalent. And what do you think? Because that seems to me to be one is warming, the other is just less snow.
Yeah, well, less snow. Another counterintuitive piece about instability and more dangerous. Again, if you define it as the higher increased chance of triggering an avalanche, is a thin snowpack, especially at the beginning of the season, and especially in climates where the temperatures tend to be lower and you have more clear, cold days and nights. That is much more that will create a lot more of a dangerous situation. Like I've said in Val d'Isère, the deadliest, where I've spent most of my time, the deadliest winter that I know of was in the season of 2010 and 2011. It was the least amount of snow we had in 30 seasons, and it really fooled a lot of people because there was less snow, as you say, Chris, and it didn't snow for a while. So then when the snow came down on top of that, it was an extremely weak layer that claimed the lives of a lot of people, not only after that first snowfall, but when we have a weak layer that's really thick and set up because of a thin snow layer, often which is the case, it becomes what we call a persistent weak layer that stayed around for the whole season and was responsible especially for a lot of the accidents in December, January, and into February.
So I mean that makes a bridge into the next subject, which was what is the risk of going into avalanche terrain, and I said the bridge in my mind is that actually the risk to avalanche terrain has an awful lot to do with how you conduct yourself, which I think is what we're going to cover, and actually the risks of climate change to whether or not we have trouble in avalanche terrain seem way less important to me than the risk of not adopting good risk management.
Yeah, I would say in some, I agree with that. And when we get into the questions, comments part of the session in a few minutes here, I'd be interested to hear what people think about that observation, that it's less about climate change, global warming, than it is about people applying the key safety points, the key accident reduction points. And that's where we transfer over into this, what is the risk of riding in avalanche terrain, where Bruce Tremper lays down some reference points, compares what the risks are to other activities.
So do you want to show us the other video, I think, at this point?
Yeah. And but I'd like to say that I think the main key is people not applying what they the safety points, and it's been shown that in the majority of accidents, people did have enough training to know what safety points should be applied, prevention points, and they also had enough training to be aware of some clear signs of danger that existed, but yet they still did not apply these key basic points of accident reduction. And that's something we're going to address in a moment as well. But here is the video that I made about why it's so important, I think, to at least start with a clear reference point of what safe looks like, what dangerous looks like. And so here we go.
When talking about risk management in contexts like avalanche terrain, we need general points of reference to help us define what we mean by risky or high risk, acceptably safe, dangerous, because these are really quite vague terms if you think about it. For example, dangerous to some people is acceptably safe to others. Riding a bike in London seems dangerous to me, but it's obviously acceptable to lots of other people. And at Henry's Avalanche talk, our point of reference for acceptably safe is everyday activities, like driving a car for an hour. And where we got that from was from well-known avalanche expert Bruce Tremper's research article entitled "The Risks of Riding in Avalanche Terrain," where he compares ski touring in various conditions to other activities like whitewater rafting, to base jumping, climbing. So I'll be exploring Bruce's research.
So that's the point of the points of reference that Bruce Tremper aligns in that article. And I'm not sure if many of you if any of you have taken a look at the article, but the point of reference that we at Henry's Avalanche talk
Article and the HAD prevention framework in upcoming webinars and other events
that we base on is the point that's acceptably safe. Now you can agree with this or not, but where we create at least a reference point is driving an hour per day. If you can see my cursor down here, which is about the same, number 2 deaths per million of days, to backcountry skiing in Austria, which is using normal risk reduction measures. And that's actually where what Bruce is saying there is that that's the fact that that danger level is equivalent with driving a car 1 hour per day is because people are applying this using their normal risk reduction measures. He makes a clear point in this article that if it's going to be at that level of surprisingly safe, as he says, you have to be doing the activity of backcountry skiing by applying the basics. If you do not, and you're, as to use the North American expression, center punching 10 slopes a day, that means going straight out into the middle of a slope on a high danger rating of 4, without any risk reduction, without any accident reduction points, it's about as high as riding a motorcycle for 8 hours per day and base jumping, which actually puts a lot of things of our activities in perspective. Riding a motorcycle for 8 hours a day and base jumping are quite similar. And according to these statistics that weren't only done by Bruce Tremper, they were done by other snow and avalanche experts. Bruce Jameson in Canada, and also was worked in with various different studies by in Europe as well, namely Werner Munter, who created the Munter test. And I think, Chris, if you have anything to add, go ahead and add it. I was just going to finish up by also just saying that one thing that Bruce leaves out of this is the actual basic risk reduction, accident reduction points that I'll introduce before you open things up to questions and comments.
Well, I was going to say, because that leads on to the point, which is that it's not a question of whether you know how to manage avalanche risk, as to which obviously is the first step in the process, but whether you apply it, and the big change in the period that we've been working together, Henry, is that the big change that you've introduced is to move from transmitting knowledge to to providing tools to help people apply it on a regular basis. So I think it's probably pertinent to just have a quick look at the framework at this point.
Yeah, this is a framework that I developed. You said that I started introducing this idea of emphasizing not only education, because but also introducing tools and a structure for applying these basic accident reduction points. And the reason I've done it is not because I've invented it. It's because that's what all of the studies have shown. And not only the studies by various different people that I can see, there's a lot of really experienced people on this webinar tonight, so that you'll recognize names like Ian McGammon and Bruce Tremper and other people like that who've done lots and lots of research into why accidents are happening. And it's been shown time and time again, it's that the people did have the knowledge, but they just weren't applying it. And a lot of that also equates with the fact that those of us who are professionals on this tonight or very experienced, many times after an accident happens, we sort of looking at each other thinking, well, gosh, they should have known better. And the point is that they did know better. They just weren't applying their experience or their knowledge. So with the experts, Ian McCammon is one of them, but there's other people too. The solution is applying decision-making tools, simply applied, or decision-making tools that can be simply applied, or I like to say accident reduction tools that can be simply applied. And I'm not going to go through the whole thing on the Henry's Avalanche talk side of things, but I'm just going to give you our basic framework that I now have in a pocket memory aid, and that is not just a decision-making tool. It helps all of us to remember to apply these various different points where there's decision-making. That's whether or not we go into avalanche terrain in the first place, because of course you can make the decision not to go into avalanche terrain and get into an area of what I call risk avoidance. And these are the key points that tend to be left out when an accident happens. Not just one of them, usually 3 or 4 of the key points of accident reduction were not applied by the group, and when there's an accident, and it's usually a group, the majority of the time, who did have enough experience and knowledge to be able to know about these accident reduction points, and also had enough training to be able to recognize the clear signs of danger that were present at the time.
Now, Henry, the interesting thing to me about this is that there's no snow science there's nobody digging snow pits in this picture. There's nobody peering at through a microscope at snow crystals. There's none of that going on, and you're saying that but we can manage risk, and you're not mentioning any of that. You're just talking one or two things we can observe.
As long as you have a rating and a bulletin, and because I think, in my opinion, it's more important to let the experts, the snow science experts and avalanche forecast experts, do their work, and then getting good at interpreting the rating and the bulletin in the decision-making part of part of things, especially recent avalanche activities, often in a bulletin. And I think that's a lot more important than digging snow pits. And because you have to dig, well, you not only have to have an enormous amount of experience to be able to interpret the snow pit data, but you also you need to be doing it regularly, 60, 70 times a season. And there's this thing called spatial variability. On one part of a slope, you could get one bit of feedback, and the snow pit will look very, very different and will give different feedback than in another part of the slope, which gets back to the question that everybody asks is, well, why don't people apply this? And one of the reasons is because most of the time nothing happens, and because of the lack of feedback that we get from the environment.
But the bright spot here for me, if you go back to that slide, Henry, the bright spot here for me is that anybody can understand these 9 points.
Yeah, and
can start practicing and applying them. And
yeah, and we're not saying,
without having to attend a 1 week or a 3-month program on snow science and avalanche awareness.
Well, the point that Bruce Tremper makes, who is who has spent many decades studying the subject and doing long courses, he talks about the basic key accident reduction points. I think he uses the word risk reduction points. And the basic ones are the ones you learn in avalanche classes, not the long studies or even the really long week-long courses. And I believe in a couple a day or two of courses, and then continually learning and knowing your limits. And also to help apply, because of course we always have distractions, and I've also in this this framework, accident reduction framework, what I tried to do, and getting back to Bruce Tremper, is I've come up with a scale. It's a bit like the evaluator in Canada, but geared towards Europe. And the idea is that there's just in each one of those points, those different points, the first 2 columns, you have different numeric values that are associated next to them, and they situate you on a scale at the bottom. I'm not going to go into detail on each one. That's what the talks are about. But what I've done is on the number 5 one to establish what is acceptably safe, as thus defined, whether you agree with it or not. That's the way we're defining it. Approximate level danger of daily actions like driving a car is in the middle, and we're going to be distributing these cards more readily through our website and things, if anyone's interested in that. And that's probably that's one of the questions that has been coming up, and at all the talks we do and all the training we do at Henry's Avalanche Talk.
Well, that's Henry. I think that's the presentation part. I'd like to open it up to any questions at the minute, and just ask if anybody wants to speak. Please just raise your hand, and I'll bring you into the webinar, and or if you just got a question, just place it in the Q&A, or a comment. That doesn't have to be a question. Here we go. We got someone who wants to speak, so that's even better. Hi, Tony.
Hi, Henry. Hope you're doing well.
Good, thanks. Thank you.
I've been in the fortunate position where I've actually been touring with Henry probably 5 years ago, and the one thing on the risk reduction that you kind of imply, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of experienced skiers on this call, but the one thing is that we don't always have, or are fortunate enough, is to live out in the Alps or those places that we visit. So a lot of us are very competent skiers that spend 2, 3, 4 weeks a year going out to ski. But I can't advocate enough of the risk reduction is actually going out with a guide like yourself, which makes skiing that much more enjoyable, because some of that decision making we're making as a group and not as a group of friends. We're making them collectively with an expert to guide us. So I know that you don't always advocate yourselves, but I would definitely recommend that if you get a chance and you want to go touring, that you use a guide.
Thanks for that, Tony, and thanks for the vote of confidence in that. And I appreciate that, and I do get people telling me that I should be promoting myself and my guiding services a bit more, because I guess it's well, we have local knowledge, which does help a lot with the day, and the decision making. And what I also what I just got from your comment there too was, you mentioned collectively making decisions with a guide, and I think more and more that's an important piece of the whole thing. Just like co-pilots are such an important piece nowadays, not only with commercial flights, but with also military as well. I have a good friend who's an ex-fighter pilot who sometimes comes on as a guest speaker, and he just emphasizes over and over again how important it is for the team to be working together and also to have a co-pilot. And that's why it's so important also for me that there's shared points of reference for what's dangerous and what's not dangerous. And we as professionals, it's so easy for us to get distracted and distracted by things that will potentially lead us to not apply those key basic points. And so I appreciate that. And yeah, well, I'll stop it there. Did you have anything else to add?
I'm not sure if sorry, I think I was on mute.
Oh, okay.
So
Cheers, nothing else, thanks.
Okay, well, thanks for adding that in. And I also forget to mention at the beginning of talks and webinars like this here is our goal is really to help people to have the most fun in the backcountry, most fun off piste, and touring with or without a guide. And you can learn an enormous amount with people, with professionals, and also benefit from the local knowledge. So again, thank you for that, Tony. Does anyone else have anything to add?
you can type something in, or I can bring you online. Right?
Yeah, Ken, do you want to mention anything? Ken Scott is. I mean, there's a whole. We could spend hours having a chat with him, and I'll mention other things. But Ken is a very experienced. He's worked as a ski patrol, and he and his wife worked all throughout the North America, in ski resorts and in all kinds of activities as well. Ken also has experience being under the snow for an excessively and horrifying long amount of time under the snow. And so I don't know if you want to make any comments about what I just said, or questions or anything, Ken, or am I scaring you off?
We put you in the spot. Yeah.
No. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's great to
you're
hear
in.
from you, Ken.
It's fantastic to see and hear you, Henry. I would like to second Tony's comments and just say that truly some of the best days I've had are skiing with you in Val d'Isere. So
That's really
thank you.
sweet.
I was I was trying to stay under the radar a little bit.
I'm sorry, I know I put you on the spot, and if
I did feel a bit bad
go
bringing
back
him in
under
there,
the radar,
Ken.
go
No,
ahead.
no. It's the comes with the territory, the risk of being present, right?
Yeah.
I
We
guess.
don't-
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was going to say it's not obligatory that you have to come up with something, Ken, because we put you on the spot now. So.
No, I mean, I would suppose that there are people on this Zoom that might not know my experience. So just very briefly, January 7th, 2020, myself and 7 others were involved in 2 consecutive avalanches inbounds on a designated run lift service within the ski area boundaries. 3 people died as a result of those avalanches. The slope was a designated run, controlled area by ski patrol.
Was it, Ken, was it an actual run, or was it inbounds but not an actual normally groomed run for those of us in Europe to?
So it's not a groomed run, but it is a designated run. It is
okay. Yeah, that's right. I remember.
Yeah. So not a groomed run, but cut a cut designated run through the trees have been removed. The hill has been altered in some ways to make it a run by
Yeah.
the ski area. Kind of, I suppose, in that gray area between a groomed run and off piste,
Okay.
shall we say?
Okay.
But a designated run on the trail map.
But and it was open anyway.
Absolutely, it had been closed up until that morning, the entire season beforehand. They had not opened the terrain, and that morning they dropped the rope, they opened the gate and allowed the general public into the area.
And just Ken, remind me, was in terms of bringing it into one of the themes here, the global warming and all, was that that from what I remember from your story, and by the way, everybody, there is a TED talk that Ken does on this. It was more the cold, dry slab conditions, wasn't it, with depth hoar underneath?
Yeah, we had some depth hoar underneath. And it was really the first big storm of that season. There had been smaller storms, and there was plenty of snow to ski the slope, but ski patrol hadn't opened it yet. And this storm came in. It had snowed. The day before was a great powder day. It snowed all night that night.
Yeah.
And everybody knew it was going to be a great powder day. And there was a significant prevailing wind. So we had some wind loading. And then throughout the morning, the temperature did start to rise. And so you've got wind loading, hoarfrost, and a rising temperature.
Yeah, yeah. And then not
on a previously unskied slope.
Yeah, so there's no benefit from skier compaction. That's something I want to bring up as well, is a lot of people with a lot of experience in Europe, and I've seen it also. It's called the early season snowpack in North America as well as here. There's a big difference between off-piste runs and that have been skied by thousands and thousands of people, and off-piste or backcountry, side country areas that have only been skied by few or nobody. And again, so what is that? There was no skier compaction there, was there?
No. And in previous seasons, patrol had opened the terrain earlier, providing much more skier compaction than this particular season.
Yeah. And
skier compaction's huge, right?
Yes, well, and I'll just make a point, just very quickly, Ken. Someone mentioned that the equivalent of what you're talking about in Europe is often what's referred to as an itinerary run. Tony brought that up. It's sort of like a run that's never groomed, but they do avalanche control for it. So it's a bit like inbounds in North America. And I was going to make a point that about, yes, and you've probably done this before in the continental climates of North America, and where I lived in Bozeman, Montana, and Big Sky and Bridger Bowl and around there, places like that, but all around through Colorado as well, Wyoming. Ski patrol often get out and do before the ski area opens, do something called boot packing, which doesn't really exist in Europe because the ski areas are much bigger. But we'll go out, ski patrol will go out and actually take their skis off and these will be on black runs, of course, slopes that are steep enough to slide, and pack down with their boots. They'll be packing down that early layer of hoarfrost or depth hoar that we've been referring to, which is a sugary type of snow that develops more in the cold, dry climates, and because of thin snowpack. Is that pretty consistent with what your experience has been, Ken?
Yeah, boot packing, I think historically was very prevalent in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah,
And my perception is that it is not practiced as much as it was historically.
it's dating me.
And me.
We're getting old.
Indeed. And part of that is improved technology. We didn't have the grooming equipment. We didn't have avalanche forecasting was not as sophisticated back then. So a lot of things have changed over the years. And there are patrols that do still do boot packing on certain runs.
Okay, well that's really interesting, your perspective, and I just want to say to everybody that that Ken does have an amazing, very emotional TED Talk that if you'd like, Ken, you can post it here. You should be able to, on a Q&A bit, just put a link into that, and
Okay.
we'll share it with everybody.
Yeah,
And
sounds good.
and if you have any other comments, come back in.
Dave has just come in now,
Dave
Henry.
here.
So Dave, do you want to?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Good
Hi,
evening,
Dave.
Henry and everybody.
Hi, Dave.
Just taking normal notes and thinking deeply about this thing. I think one of the key points that you raised there, or I think what we're doing quite a lot with these Henry's Avalanche talks, is kind of helping people become co-pilots. So quite often it was raised earlier that guides are good, perfect, brilliant. And then, but by giving people some of the facts and helping them understand where the risk is going to be highest, the sort of angles of the slope, learning to use the avalanche bulletins, I think we're just helping people become better co-pilots. And I think that's a really good first stage. So knowing the facts is really good. You don't need to exactly know how to analyze a snow crystal or dig a snow pit. There's plenty of facts out there that we can upskill to.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. I'm going to use that at the beginning of the talks too, when I tell people that what we're aiming to do is help people to have more fun, be safer with or without a guide, and helping, telling people who are not professionals to just help people to become co-pilots. And I often mention that the goal for an entire group should be just really good co-pilots, everybody to be co-pilots and share. It's good to have one leader when it's a group without a professional, a designated leader, but everybody kind of coming in as with co-pilots, because it's just so easy to miss things in this environment with this low validity, low feedback environment that NASA described as situational, the potential for situational blindness, like they had with the Apollo, I forget which one it was. Was it the Apollo one where they had the terrible accident?
And I think we'll be out of time shortly. So Ken, you've got your hand up. Yeah.
Well, yeah, just to that point exactly, a little bit more on our situation. We had skied around for a couple of hours that morning, my partner Rebecca and I, and then the terrain was opened. The run is accessed by a short traverse, and on that traverse, we saw the bomb craters and the evidence of ski patrol having done avalanche mitigation work, right? And
Yeah.
I actually commented, well, patrol's done their job. They've opened the terrain. It must be good to go. That's what they're there for. And so I, in effect, had situational, what is it called? Situational blindness?
Blindness, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I placed myself by making that comment. Ski patrol's done their job. We've got a pass. We're good to go. We don't have to think.
Yeah.
I handed over all my experience and knowledge to a third party.
Yeah.
Well, that's a very that's a very interesting observation. I kind of think that's very telling when you when you stop, you take things for granted and you stop thinking. Yeah, thank you, Ken.
Yeah, and I think thanks for that, Ken. It's one of the reasons I think it's really good what they're doing in most of Europe and most of the resorts, where they allow you to go where you want, and instead of restrictions, they encourage education, prevention, and responsibility for oneself. And I hope that it can continue to evolve that way in North America with gates and people going out and making decisions for themselves, so that we do take responsibility for going into backcountry, or even just on the side country like you're talking about there, Ken. You and I both know about a number of post control accidents. And post control, for those of you who don't know what that means, is that after doing avalanche control with explosives, they're professional avalanche experts. Often we get in the habit of going out and skiing the slope after we've thrown a charge on it. And I know of at least two, I think even three situations where a very experienced professional was killed that way. One in Saint Foy here, one in Big Sky. And it just shows again that that's just another example of how the low validity nature, the low feedback nature of the environment that we're of avalanche terrain, and obviously the high consequence side of things.
Well,
and then I'll just add the importance of applying, just even the basics that we know. And I say every time, if there's one thing that people should remember from their training or an avalanche talk, is steep slopes above terrain traps. If we all avoided steep slopes above cliffs and holes and trees and things like that, that would reduce our chances enormously, or at least giving some thought before jumping out and center punching things.
So I shall take from this call, Henry, that there may be many things to do with climate change that I need to worry about, but one of them isn't to stop me going off-piste skiing, and
No.
and the other thing is, of course, that the risk that I face is very much in my hands or my friends' hands when we go together.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thanks for summarizing that, Chris.
Well, thank you very much, everyone, for your time. We've been 45 minutes, and I hope you found it interesting, entertaining, or useful, or something else very pleasant. And we've got a couple more of these going on before Henry comes over to the UK. So thanks very much for joining in. And if you know anybody that you think would appreciate this, then please do encourage them to join one of our future calls. So
yeah, and they're different each week too, even though the theme is somewhat more or less the same title each week. Each week is different. Like this week, we really threw in the global warming, climate change side of things, and there's always a different contribution, like we had this evening from the various people who contributed. So thanks very much for contributing, guys. And yeah, pass it on to your friends. I'll be touring around the UK quite a bit, and up in Glasgow with Dave, who contributed earlier. So hope to see you all soon here again on Henry's Avalanche Talk, where safety is freedom.